Good afternoon, everybody. I am Mandy Colville. I'm an advocate with the ARC of Northeast Pennsylvania, and I am joined with my colleagues Roseanne Polishin and Katie Foley. We provide free advocacy for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And besides working with families, we are also all parents of children with intellectual or developmental disabilities. So we truly understand the parent perspective on things and how the process works and how overwhelming it can be for people. One of our important messages we always like to convey to parents is a more informed parent is a better advocate. So we develop these parent training series with that in mind to try to give the information to parents so that they can be more informed participants with their child. And we also welcome the professionals who join us who are able to help assist the families in making sure all the children's needs are met. So today we'll be talking about the early intervention process from kindergarten, from early intervention into kindergarten. So what is transitions? The purpose of transition is to ensure that special education students with disabilities are not getting an interrupted program when they transition from preschool to the school age program. We want to make sure that all their needs are in place, their services are agreed upon so that when they start the school age program, they are ready to go, supported and in an appropriate placement. It takes place months prior to the start of kindergarten. And by the end of spring, when the process is finished, there should be a placement and a plan in place with an IEP if warranted and ready to go implemented on the first day of school. So this eliminates any delays or any let's wait and see scenarios. And of course, even though we have all these process with these meetings and the transition process ahead of times, an IEP meeting can be called at any time once the school year starts. That way you're able to make any revisions or changes to the IEP as needed. So some key timelines that you want to be aware of is February 1st. By February 1st, all early intervention programs must identify the children in their programs who are approaching the age for kindergarten or first grade in their districts of residence, and they must send a letter to the parents explaining the transition process, and that will be called the Notice of Your Child Transitioning to a School Age Meeting. Many of you have already gotten this notice. Usually in December, they start mailing them out. By January, you should receive it so that by February 1st, everyone has been notified that a meeting will be set up and in place. And these meetings need to be held by February 28th. So sometime in the month of February, it could start earlier in larger districts that have a lot of children that they need to get through. But usually in February, these meetings take place. And that would be the first of several meetings in this transition process. Just to point out to some parents, you do have the option of remaining in early intervention for an extra year. Although your child may be approaching the age for enrollment in kindergarten in Pennsylvania, you do have that right to decide to stay in early intervention an extra year or to register for kindergarten. So you can do this by parent request. The services that are currently in the IEP will still continue to be provided to you at no cost during that year. We certainly recommend that if you are uncertain about whether you should go to kindergarten or stay in early intervention, you still go through the transition process anyway. You'll become more familiar with the process that eventually you're going to have to go through anyway. You will see through the evaluation process what your child qualifies for in the evaluations, because the school age evaluations do differ from early intervention evaluations, and the criteria differs for what you qualify for. The services certainly do differ. And this way, you can pursue your options once you have all the data in front of you on the placements and the services that your school district can offer versus what placements and services your early intervention provider can offer. It's an individual decision made by you, and you get input with all this data from the evaluations and from what the IEP team has said and considered. You need to weigh the pros and cons based on your child and what their needs are. Consider factors like where your child can get the most services and help. And keep in mind that school is not only about academics. Many parents start to think that their child does not have those necessary kindergarten readiness skills, so that they should not go to kindergarten yet. But if your child does qualify for special education, know that an IEP can address more than just academics. It can also address behavior, social and emotional needs, and adaptive functioning skills. So your child does not need to be proficient in those typical kindergarten readiness skills if they qualify for the IEP. Those areas can and will be addressed through the IEP, accommodations, specially designed instructions, and through goals. So it is also worth mentioning that some students who do qualify for IEPs are allowed to stay in school until their 22nd birthday. So that also gives a little extra time in their education process to achieve the goals. Students who are entering kindergarten in the fall will still continue to receive their early intervention services through the summer months, as if they were still continuing with early intervention. They'll still get those summer months of services there, so that there are no large gaps of services for the child before school starts. So what to expect at the meetings. And there are actually going to be about 3 big meetings that occur. So the transition process starts with an initial meeting in February, and this meeting will be very brief, and there will be a lot of people involved in the meeting. You will have your early intervention providers, your therapists, your teachers, those who are working currently with your child now. You'll also have representatives from the school district you belong to. So your director of special education could be there, educational consultants, school psychologists, the therapists that belong to the school district, and even the principal of that school that your child will go to can and will attend these meetings. So it's going to be a lot of people at once all together, and it's going to be a very brief meeting, so it is moving fast pace. Your early intervention providers will share the present levels of your child. They will share their strengths and their needs. And the parents will also have an opportunity to share information about the child. So what should you do for this meeting to prepare for it? Bring someone with you to take notes. Again, it's a very fast-paced meeting. It lasts maybe 15-20 minutes even. But there are so many people involved, talking, asking questions, and you want to be able to participate. So bring anybody you'd like with you who could take notes about things people are discussing or saying that are going to happen. Don't be afraid to ask questions at the meeting and express concerns. And the best way to do that is think of them ahead of time and write them down, because you don't want to forget to say anything or ask any important questions, because it is going to be very fast paced there. And you don't want to have anything overlooked in the process. Don't be afraid to speak up. Ask the questions. Oftentimes in education, we use a lot of acronyms for things, and professionals don't always realize they're talking in acronyms. And if you're not understanding something, bring it to their attention. Excuse me, what did that mean? What are you referring to? Could you explain this process a little bit more? And make sure that you're able to bring those questions and concerns that you have about this process with you, so that you can have a full understanding of what's going on. Some of the things that you want to share with the team when you do go to the meeting, you're going to share your child's strengths. Oh, I think we're on to the next slide, Roseanne. There you go. Share your child's strengths, any health issues that they do have, because sometimes that does become part of the IEP and things to consider in placement and services. Any past experiences your child has had with school, medications that your child is on currently and how that may impact them, the family dynamics and how that also may impact your child during their school day, behaviors your child has, reinforcers, concerns about safety, triggers for behaviors, specific interests that your child has. This information will help the people who are going to be meeting and evaluating your child if they have some kind of idea about things that they can do to capture their attention and motivate them moving forward. You also want to talk about what your goals for your child over the next year could be. Again, remember I mentioned that the IEP is not just about academics. It could address many of the other areas of function for your child. And if you have concerns about a specific skill or something that you're triaging as maybe the most important thing you need to think about or work on, bring that to your team's attention at that time. For instance, if your child is not yet toilet trained, maybe that will be something you really want to focus on for that first year of kindergarten, and say that I'm looking for some daily life skills here that we want to function with the toilet, and we want to make sure that's a goal and addressed in the IEP. Maybe behavior is your top concern, eloping or being aggressive or time on task. Academics can certainly be what you're most interested in, making sure your child has those pre-reading skills, or communication, whether it is communicating instead of being aggressive, or being able to verbalize complete sentences, or articulation, or using a communication device. So think about what your biggest goal for your child is, what their biggest area of need is, and express that with the team as well, because those kind of things are going to be very important to the team who will be evaluating your child, so they know what areas they need to be evaluating and looking for. Again, this whole first meeting is just going to be about 15-20 minutes in length, so it is very fast paced. So once this meeting is done, you will be given an intent to register or notice of options form. As I previously mentioned, you do have the option of staying in early intervention for an extra year, but signing this form allows the school to proceed with the transition process. If you do not sign the form, the school will not come in, they will not observe, and they will not evaluate. They will not go through all the different process that they need to do in their certain timeline to have this done and ready for you. Signing the form, if you're on the fence about you're not sure whether or not you're going to stay in early intervention or go to the kindergarten program, signing the form does not commit you to attending kindergarten. You can change your mind at any time up until, the day before school starts even. However, not signing the form will stop the process from taking place. And this is a long process. There's a lot of timelines involved, a lot of moving pieces, and staff members that need to be involved, completing evaluations, having meetings and IEPs, touring buildings. So you really don't want to delay signing the form to proceed with the transition process. Also, signing the form, even if you do think you're going to stay in early intervention a year, this is going to give you all that information that you need to compare, to say, this is what the school district can do versus this is what will happen if I stay in early intervention. So this is going to give you that complete picture of your child, their services, what school would look like. So make sure you do sign that form and return that to the school district in a timely fashion. After listening to all the present levels that were discussed at your initial meeting, the district may find that they were given sufficient information that would warrant pursuing additional testing and services for your child. So then they would present you with the notice of options form. And it can be completed as early as the transition meeting in February, or they can mail it to you after the fact. A lot of times nowadays, districts do use email for these forms and have you e-sign. But you should have it no later than April 15th, and it will explain the options that the school is thinking about taking. Please note that if you haven't signed it by May, so if it's sent to you and you are neglectful in signing it and returning it, it is going to hold up the process. There is a 60-day timeline to evaluate the child, and if you're holding up sending in the form, your child will likely not get their evaluation completed prior to school starting, because the timeline will stop on the last day of school. It's not 60 calendar days through the summer. It's 60 calendar days until the last day of school, and then a pause is put on that. So when you do get forms from the school, make sure you're paying good attention to them, reading them, sending them on to somebody if you need help interpreting them, but returning them in a timely fashion as to not hold up the process at all. Be proactive to reach out to your district. If April's approaching and you haven't gotten any forms to sign, like a permission to evaluate form, reach out to the people who attended your meeting and inquire, when can I be expecting this? I really am feel my child needs to be evaluated, and I want to make sure we have enough time in the school year for this to take place so that we're ready for the start of school. Sending an email to remind or to inquire about a timeline is perfectly acceptable, but you do not want to delay in having that reeval take place. So once you see all of the form, you'll see the different options, and one of them could be to adopt and implement the early intervention IEP, which you would sign an ORAP for. Another would be to adopt the early intervention IEP with revisions, again, signing what you're agreeing to and the NORAP. Now, those two options happened more so during the COVID time when they weren't able to get in and really observe and evaluate the child in the early intervention setting because there were restrictions on that. That is usually not the option taken these days. And if for some reason the district is falling back on that, I would certainly advocate on your child's behalf that you think that they need a full and comprehensive evaluation done by the school district, as the tools they're doing are different, as it could impact your decision on sending your child to early intervention versus kindergarten, and to see what services. So generally what is done most of the time is the district will propose to conduct their own reevaluation. And they will do that using existing data that they gathered from your first transition meeting. They will do that with data that the early intervention provider is showing them on the past evaluations and their progress monitoring. And the new data they are getting from coming in to observe your child in their preschool setting, and the individual evaluations they are doing with the child, as well as any parent input forms they may have you do. So you will get a permission to evaluate form, sometimes called the PTE. Again, sign and date that form, because upon receipt of that, the school district then has 60 days to conduct this evaluation and be given you back a report on day 60. So you can see what the synopsis was of what the district was able to get from your child. So you really want to make sure, again, things are happening in a timely fashion. Ask for copies of the evaluation when it is finished, so you have time to review or to pass on to somebody to review and go over with you. It's important to note that preschool students who are attending alternative placements, such as an early intervention behavioral intervention program, also called the ABA programs, you may not have a IEP for your child currently, but you should still be making sure you're going through this process with your child, with the school district, so they are aware that this child is in the district and is likely in need of services, so they should have the evaluation taking place. If the child is eligible for preschool, they remain preschool early intervention, they remain eligible for school age services unless there's a reevaluation and an ORAP sign stating the child is no longer eligible for services. And again, relying on those evaluations and that data would be the way to make sure your child is eligible or not eligible. And also important to note that students who go through this transition process because they are getting early intervention still need to go through the regular kindergarten registration process all the other kindergartners are going to. So that means pay attention to when your district is advertising kindergarten registration time, where you need to come in with the birth certificate, the proof of residency, filling out the forms, handing in medical forms, orientation. So these are two separate procedures and programs that are going to be taking place, your transition program and your kindergarten registration program. So you still need to make sure you're participating and paying attention to both of those. So now at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Roseanne, who will discuss what's happening once the evaluation is complete.
Thanks, Mandy. Now we're going to delve into a little bit, like Mandy said, of the evaluation report. So once that 60 days or leading up to that 60 days has passed and your child has had the evaluations and the observations and you've filled in all your forms and so forth, you will be given an evaluation report. And that evaluation report should come within 60 days from signing that permission to evaluate. You should have a meeting to go over this report, and that meeting may take place at the school district or it may take place on Zoom. There is just a meaningful way for you to participate and be able to be a part of reviewing this evaluation, whether that's in person or on the computer, what works best for yourself as the parent and the team. They're going to talk about if your child qualifies for an IEP. And for qualifying, the student needs to be eligible under one of the 13 categories of disability and have the need for specially designed instruction. They're going to recommend and discuss a lot of different things in this evaluation report. All the results of the testing that took place, as well as the present levels of the student, their strengths and their needs, the parental input, and the recommendations for moving forward for the student. And they may talk about placement options as well. But even if you're not ready to commit or decide anything, you can certainly ask as many questions about things that are detailed in the evaluation report. And you want to be able to make an informed decision on your child moving forward into the school district and have this information as best as you can, because the next step, if they do qualify, would be to have the IEP meeting. You're going to want to request a copy of this evaluation report in advance of the meeting so that you can read through it and familiarize yourself with the information that's in there. Even though they will be going over the report at the meeting, it's good to have that report ahead of time. If you're new to this process and there's a lot of information in there, it could be really overwhelming, but if you're able to review it ahead of time, you may be able to highlight some areas that you have questions on, things that you may not agree with, things you don't understand the acronyms. But if you get that report ahead of time, you can review that and be a little bit prepared for the meeting. The meeting, like I said, will take place at the school district or with the school district, and they will usually have in attendance the school psychologist, the person that did the testing, or any related service providers that may have done testing, or the sections on, say, for example, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, any behavior, anything that was in that report. People that would interpret the results should be at that meeting, and the special education director or the local education agency representative who is responsible for agreeing to the decisions in this IEP sometime, or in this evaluation. And then the principal or any other therapist, like I mentioned, can attend this meeting, and the parent could bring whoever they would like to go over that meeting with them in terms of knowing the student or supporting the family and the individual. So here are some suggestions for your evaluation report meeting. Like I mentioned on the last slide, if you get that evaluation report in advance, please read through it, even in sections or little by little, and make some highlights or some notes on it. Bring someone with you to the meeting. We always suggest that so they can take notes. It's a lot to take in, a lot of information about your child. It sometimes could be emotional. If you've seen like they have a lot of needs, or they have some behaviors or things that, or they weren't able to do the testing, it could be very emotional. And if you have someone else there that could take notes, you can kind of focus on listening, and that person might catch things that you may have missed. And they may be able to give some input as well if they know the student. Requests, again, like we said, placement option tours. If it's suggested that, for example, your child may need autistic support classroom, ask, where are those classrooms in the school district? What building are they in? Is this the neighborhood school my child would attend if they didn't have a disability? Is this the least restrictive environment? After you go through this evaluation report meeting, anything that comes to mind, feel free to ask it. If your child's going to need additional support in the school system, and you don't already have it set up, then you're going to want to try to begin the process to get a behavior tech from an outside agency, or talk about it with the team if that's something that you feel is going to be needed. Or if the school is going to provide a personal care assistance, or are you going to need to get your own home health aide to go to school and also to go through home. Any of those supports that your child might benefit for. If your child's at an ABA program or EIBI program currently, and they are getting that one-to-one support, and that's something you need to talk about, maybe needs to follow them to school, you're going to have those conversations with the school district and with the agency you're using, because staffing, we all know, can be difficult, and you want to begin that process as soon as possible. So after you have this evaluation report meeting, you're going to have an IEP meeting within 30 days of the evaluation report. And there'll be an invitation that will suggest a time and date and a place. And it should be something that works for everyone on the team. If that time or date doesn't work, you can go back and say, this isn't what works. Here's another option, and discuss that with the team. So when you do get that invitation, you'll sign that. In attendance at this IEP team meeting will be, again, the director of special education, or the person that fills the role of the LEA. which could be a principal or some other designated person, but most likely the special education supervisor or director. A regular education teacher should be there, and so should the special education teacher. Any therapists as well should be at the meeting if if your child's going to be having these different related services. And again, the parent should be there, the guardian, or anyone they choose to bring to the meeting. If you have a behavior specialist or BCBA that's worked with them for many years, you may want to consider bringing them to the team IEP team meeting as well. We always remind folks, parents, that you're an equal member of the IEP team. And although there are different roles and there's different expertise, you are the expert on your child. You want to start off on good footing with your school district team because it's going to be a long relationship, and you're going to be working together for many years, and everyone has the goal of helping the student to receive a meaningful education and make progress. So you feel that you can contribute, even though people are the experts and have the education. You do know your child, and you're open to making any suggestions you feel would benefit your child to the team. So at this meeting, going to discuss a number of different things. So the evaluation report information should be added to the present levels of the IEP and discussed their strengths, the needs, and that information will help drive the goals that the child's going to need. And it could be goals, academic-based goals, functional, or social, emotional goals, behavior type goals, adaptive functioning goals. There's a lot of different goals, and it should be on the needs that were discovered from that evaluation. There's going to be discussed specially designed instruction, which is how the information is going to be presented to the child, the curriculums, the accommodations, the modifications, the different things that are going to be done specific for that student. And there's going to be a section with parental concerns in this area. And that's a really important section where it can be noted exactly what you feel. And the concerns is not a negative. It means just what you'd like to see happen, what areas are really important to you as the parent. Is it really important that, your child is, getting potty trained, and is it really important that your child gets a functional communication system? Is it very important that your child's moving and learning to read and getting very, goals that are very ambitious and that move the child to the next level? Like, what is appropriate for your child should really be detailed, and that parental concerns is a really important section, because anything in that parental concern should be addressed in the IEP. And also, lastly, before everything else should be discussed first, then placement should be discussed last. You never want to go into an IEP meeting and they're going to say, well, your child has this disability, so this is where they're going to go to school. Because placement is the last thing discussed, and it's not an all or none type of thing. It's not driven by your disability. So, there's children that have autism that are in general education classrooms. There's children that may need and may spend more time in a special education setting, but that all should be driven by all the things that we just talked about. So here is where you can kind of ask certain questions, and I'll give you a few examples of things to consider asking at the IEP meeting. You want to ask about class size. So if your child's going to be in the kindergarten general education class, the least restrictive environment, what kind of supports and services are they going to get in that environment? How many students in there? Is there 15 kids on average, or is there 30 kids? And how is the staffing ratio? Who are the support staffs? How many paraprofessionals or one-on-one aides or individuals are in that classroom? And the same thing would go for a special education setting. If the child's going to be in autistic support or in learning support, how many students are in there? Is the student going to be pushed in? Is the special education going to be pushed into the regular ed classroom, or is the student going to be pulled out part of the day to receive their special education services? If they're getting, say, for example, a related service such as speech therapy, is this going to be in a group setting, or is this going to be individualized, or are they going to get a little bit of both? Does your child need a behavior plan? If you have a history of behaviors that you're seeing and you want them addressed, we don't want to let that go and do a wait and see approach. We want to talk about how these behaviors will be addressed as part of the IEP and how that information will be communicated to the to the teachers and staff. Another area people gets concerned about is transportation. Is your child going to ride the bus with all the other students? How are they going to get to school? Are they going to have a dedicated transportation in the IEP? Is there safety issues? Is your child an elopement risk? Does your child have a tendency to put things in their mouth that may be a safety issue that should be addressed in the IEP? Or if your child has co-occurring medical issues, such as, seizure disorder or feeding issues or allergies, any type of thing like that will need to be addressed, maybe with the supplementary health care plan or involvement of a nurse if they're going to have a nurse with them. All that should be documented somewhere at the school and may possibly need to be attached or part of the IEP as well. And then also, it's a very important area for us at the ARC and for us as families is inclusion. So your child should be included in the least restrictive environment with all supports and services that they need to be successful. So what does that inclusion look like for your child? Again, it's not all or none. What's going to be meaningful for the child to make progress? How are they going to be able to be a part of their school community and be with their peers without disabilities? So that's definitely all those areas should be really looked at and asked questions about at the IEP meeting. And remember that, the IEP, this is a draft document. If it was handed to you ahead of time, at this IEP meeting is when you're developing the IEP, when you're putting things together, and it can be changed at any time. It's not a one and done type of thing. The IEP meeting will occur as often as needed, and a parent can call it, but at least a minimum of one time per year. So 364 days later, after this IEP is done and enacted, then you will have your annual IEP meeting. After you have this meeting today, to this meeting for the early intervention transition, you will get that final copy and within 10 days, and the date of the IEP then becomes your annual review date. And just to also note, if your child is qualifying under intellectual disability, they would be reevaluated every 2 years, or other disabilities get evaluated every 3 years. And it's not to say that you can't do something a little bit sooner, but those are the regulations. But if you're finding difficulty in a certain area, or you want to see them reevaluated a little sooner, you could certainly request that and discuss it with the IEP team. So here's some things preparing for that IEP team meeting that you can do ahead of time. You can request a draft copy of the IEP in advance. If, a lot of people are working on the draft, it's not official, there's no regs on this, but if they're doing it in advance and they're going to be presenting the copy, not just working on it at the meeting, ask for that draft ahead of time. You, again, read through it, highlight if you have any questions. Again, it's a working document, but just to have that could help you sort of prepare for your meeting. And it'll help you kind of figure out what suggestions you might want to make, what questions you might have in terms of all those different sections that we talked about. Remember, you're an equal member of the IEP team, and don't be afraid to speak up or disagree. It doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to, you should feel like you're heard and feel like that you're a contributing member and that people are listening to you. And that would be the ultimate goal. Sometimes it doesn't always happen that way, but in preparing your information ahead of time, you can get a little bit more confident in what you want to say and do at the meeting. And then next, after you go through the IEP and it's created and everyone's in agreement and talking about it, and we're going to go forward with moving towards having an IEP, they're going to give you the notice of recommended educational placement, which is called the NORUP, and the initial NORUP must be signed in order for services to begin with the school district. So if you do agree, you would sign this, and then you would move forward with starting the IEP when the school starts. If you disagree, or you're having trouble coming to agreement, or you're not really sure, you don't like what they proposed, you could certainly disagree. And maybe the best thing would be to request another meeting to try to work out some details, or try to get everybody on the same page. Sometimes this does happen because if there's a placement suggested that the family doesn't necessarily agree with, or a service that they think the student should have based on the evaluation, and it's not agreed upon. But hopefully you guys, it can work that out. And then once you sign that NORUP and send it back, then the services would begin. And again, if there's majority of the stuff you agree with and you just have a little question, maybe you could write that on the NORUP and have a follow-up meeting to discuss and finalize that piece. But the NORUP is definitely where you're going to need to sign to move forward with services for special education. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Mandy to talk about some tips for transitioning your child to kindergarten.
So you want to make sure that when you're talking about the kindergarten program, you include your child in that conversation in a positive way. Avoid talking about how big the school is and all the big kids are going to be there. It's a new school, so visit the new school and show them the big playground that's there and how great that's going to be, and talk about all the different things that are going to happen at that school that they haven't had yet. Like there'll be an art class and a library there and a music teacher and a gym, and there'll be school buses that come. And so you really want to make it exciting. Visit the school as much as you can. You can do drive-throughs through the parking lot. You can, over the summer even, access the playgrounds there. Go into the office and ask when you're able to walk through the building during the summer so that they can maybe get the lay of the building and take pictures of the cafeteria or the library. So you can go home and make a little poster board about it so that they can see it and become a little bit more comfortable with it and more familiar with it. Maybe your child benefits from a social story about transitioning to a different school and what kindergarten will be like. Really, there's a lot of different picture books even about kindergarten that you can be reading with your child, and then just discuss the different things that are in the books as to what their experiences will be also with the class parties and the field trips and the things like that. Have your child participate in their back to school shopping, picking out their lunchbox and their backpacks and school supplies. And of course, participating in any of the open houses that they have upon kindergarten registration, so you can meet other families and see who's in their class and get to meet the teacher ahead of time. So you really want to do stuff with your child ahead of time to avoid any of that anxiety, and get them ready on a positive note for the new school that they're going to be in. And then once school begins, for you as a parent, we urge you to stay involved. And that can look like lots of different things. Make sure you're checking that backpack daily, folders, notes. At the primary level, take advantage of the fact that they send home newsletters and flyers about things to keep you engaged and informed. Communicate with the staff, and you'll find going to the open house at the beginning of the school year, parent-teacher conferences, discuss with your staff what their mode of communication will be. Will your child have a communication book? Does your teacher use an app, a classroom-wide app? And there's email and phone calls. So discuss with the teachers and the staff who will be with your child how the best method of communication will be, and use it. If you have any questions or concerns, reach out to the teachers as your first line of defense. No, nothing is too silly, nothing is too small if it's going to make you have some peace of mind in a situation or solve a problem early on. Really start with that chain of command. With most issues can be handled directly with the classroom teacher, and involve a miscommunication on some part. Learn what your chain of command is in case you're not able to find resolution or an answer with your question at the first time. Who do you need to go from there? Is it the case manager? Are you going to the building principal, the director of special education? So learn what your chain of command is and who the essential players are in all of that. Familiarize yourself with Chapter 14, which is our Pennsylvania school code for special education. You'll find what the regulations are, and you're going to be learning the process along with it. So you can refer to that so that you understand what timelines are, what your rights are, and resources that are available to you to help you learn more about the special education process. Participating in parent trainings is something that we recommend. And even as advocates, we are still always participating in trainings ourselves, because this is such a broad issue with so many different parameters, information that changes, scenarios that changes. It's never quite a one-size-fits-all topic. So we still participate in trainings all the time, and we encourage you to as well. It's never too early to start learning and to continue learning and having refreshers on topics, going into more depth in things. So the ARC, we host several parent trainings a year. The Peel Center is also another great one. And, via Zoom nowadays, you can hook on to so many different trainings without having to even leave your home and find babysitters. So find those resources out there on where you can look to find information for things. Certainly, as advocates, we are here to help and assist you if you have any questions or concerns. I think that the next slide has all of our contact information for the 3 different advocates that work here at the ARC of Northeast Pennsylvania. And if you are outside of our coverage area, we can certainly refer you to which ARC chapter does cover you. But this was a lot of information, and we'll stop the presentation now, and we'll be able to take any specific questions that anyone may have. You could feel free to unmute or enter questions into the chat. If you're not comfortable doing that in a group format, you may contact us privately at any time.